That is exactly it. The one and only candidate that we trust to uphold the Constitution of the United States. The one and only candidate that has a plan to actually reduce the size of the federal government, balance the budget, and reduce the deficit. The one and only candidate that, if elected, will take on the Fed, the IRS, and the IRS and the TSA. Why not? The one and only candidate that questions the foreign policy that closes bases in America and opens them everywhere else. And perhaps the one and only candidate that doesn't change positions with the rising of the tide or the change in the wind. He's also the one and only candidate that has the most loyal followers in the world. I don't know how you guys actually Facebook for more than 24 hours a day, but you do it. Well, by now you probably figured out it's not the suit, it's not the newt, and it's not the guy that got the boot. He is truly the one and only candidate that deserves to be the next President of the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored, privileged, and humbled to introduce to you the one and only Ron Paul.
Thanks for inviting me to your revolution. It's great to be here. What a nice welcome. And good to see the Justice again. Hope to see him in the Supreme Court another time. Very nice introduction. I'd like to introduce my wife of 55 years, Carol's here. Children, we brought one along, Linda. But it is great to be here and hear the enthusiasm. That means that the issues are alive and well, the spirit is alive and well. Matter of fact, not only is it alive and well, it's growing by leaps and bounds. Struggle, but we will become noticed, because what we have in Washington today, it's not working, it's failing, and they have to come our way. They have to look to the ideas of liberty to bring this country out of the doldrums, and I predict that's what's going to happen. It is wonderful. I've been talking about these issues for a long time. I also love medicine, practiced medicine for a long time. I've been in Congress for 4 terms. We went back to medicine, but you know, I thought maybe the country's ready, maybe these changes will occur. And that was in '97. And even in 1997, I was a bit disappointed. There really wasn't. But there's something different going on right now. It started about 4 years ago. I think what's happened is the recognition by just about everybody in this country there's something seriously flawed with the government that we have today, and we have to change it. That's what I think. The only thing that we've ever been offered is just tinkering with the edges, tinkering with the status quo, manage it this way. It's never, should we be managing things? Should we be in these wars? Should they be attacking our civil liberties? It's always, if you elect me, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to manage things differently. What we need is a lot less government management of our lives and a lot more individuals running their own lives. You know, you hear so often other candidates running for the president, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. The one thing, though, is, and I'm convinced, if you're a constitutional president, you really can't say that. Because the president is not supposed to be a king. The president is not supposed to say... The president is supposed to, enforce law and order. He's not supposed to go to war on his own. He's supposed to only go to war when the people endorse the war and the Congress votes for it. And the president certainly shouldn't get the authority from somebody outside this country, like the United Nations or NATO. They don't have the authority for this. But no, a president can't and shouldn't even try to run the world. I mean, we have enough job trying to run our own personal lives, so we shouldn't pretend we know what to tell other people to do. Yeah. The president shouldn't assume to run your life. It's your life. You should run your life as you please. If you make mistakes, they're your mistakes. If you're successful, you should reap the benefits of your success and not have society, when you have property rights and contracts rights and sound money, the government has a responsibility to make sure that environment is correct, that you do have freedom and this acceptance of property rights. But if you don't have that, and you can't expect a president to come in and say, under the conditions of economic intervention to run the economy, that it's only a decision that you argue, I can run the economy better than this guy, I can run the economy better. The president can't run the economy, the people have to run the economy, and you have to have your freedom. That I've discovered, matter of fact, was one of the motivating factors for me to get involved in politics many years ago, and that's the issue of money. We all want prosperity. We don't have prosperity now, and what we have is precarious because there's a misunderstanding on economics. But basically, the people in Washington, even though they do things wrong, people aren't against prosperity. But one thing with certainty, and I decided this in the late 60s, 1970s, early 70s, when I started studying monetary policy. You cannot have a sound economy, you can't have a wealthy nation if you don't have sound money. A very good idea. I'm glad to see this state, as well as other states, are taking the initiative of obeying the Constitution. It says the states cannot use anything other than silver and gold as legal tender. So when we obey that, we'll have sound money. That we had sound money put into the Constitution explicitly. It was one of the things that the founders put in because they had runaway inflation with the continental dollar. So they put in there, only gold and silver can be legal tender. There can be no printing press money, and there is no authority for a central bank. So therefore, what are we doing? Why have we allowed this to happen? For 100 years now, we have allowed the Federal Reserve to exist, and look at what they've given us. This is one place where we made tremendous progress with the people, because today, for the first time in the history of the Federal Reserve, which is 100 years old, today the Federal Reserve and their monetary manipulations, they're creating of bubbles and creating the recession, it is now an issue that almost all Americans know about today. 85% of the American people now say, at least we have to make them open the books and find out what they've been up to. Who do they take care of? Is it Wall Street? Is it Goldman Sachs and all the banks and the military? But to do it in secret, and for us to allow them to get away with this, this is beyond. I don't think we will have a republic until we know exactly who's printing the money, why they're printing money, who they're bailing out, and who they're taking care of. In our country approximately 100 years ago, the attitudes changed. They changed about what the role of government ought to be. And our founders, with the thought of revolution, they decided that the role of government wasn't all that complex. They said the role of government should be to protect liberty. No more complex than that. Protect liberty. That's what all political action should be. Working to protect individual liberty, not collective liberty. Liberty comes to us as individuals, not because we belong to a group. And everybody should have their liberty. Very clear in their understanding that social, personal liberty is not different from economic liberty. Today, some people defend economic liberty. Oh yeah, we like free enterprise and we'll try to lower taxes and things. And then another group said, no, civil liberties are important, and they will. But each group will not protect both of them. The economic libertarians will protect social liberals' liberty, and vice versa. But liberty is one unit. It comes to us as an individual. We have a right to our life. We own our life. We have our liberty. We should have the right to keep our property, and we should have economic liberty as well.
Yeah!
Understand this principle of liberty. Not only is it popular, it brings people together. This is the magnificent thing. Because if you think about it, people use their liberties differently. Most of us can understand rather clearly about religious freedom. We have religious freedom. We have freedom not to practice religion. We have freedom to pick and choose our religion. And that's a pretty important right to have. But we don't object to people who do something different than us. But too often, when it comes to other social policies, our habits and our social activities, all of a sudden we say, oh, if we give them too much freedom, they might do something that we don't approve of. And they think that liberty means that you endorse something. Not necessarily. Because we believe in religious liberty, that doesn't mean that you have to endorse anybody else's religion. You just endorse your own, and you want your freedom to practice your own religion. In social behavior, as long as people don't hurt other people and steal from other people and damage their property, it's your life, and it's your responsibility. So all of a sudden, if you understand this, this brings people of all walks of life together, because they will use their liberty in a different way, and it shouldn't be offensive. You say, well, you're tolerating too much. Well, toleration doesn't mean endorsement. What you're endorsing and what you really want is the principle of liberty. And this is what creates prosperity and creative activity, and it allows a society to be nonviolent. This endorses the nonviolent approach. And if you apply that domestically, just think of what it's like if you apply it internationally. All of a sudden, people watch the debates, but occasionally we've been having a debate here and there. And there was one night that I brought up the subject of the Golden Rule, and that wasn't the response I got. But you know, the Golden Rule is endorsed by all the major religions. It's not a outrageous religious statement. It's just a good common sense that all religions endorse. That you treat other people the way you would like to be treated. So my suggestion at the debate was, what would it be like if we treated other nations exactly the way we would like to be treated? That we own the world, that the world is ours, and now we have 900 bases. We have, 130 countries that were involved, and you'd think we'd own the Persian Gulf. But what if other nations thought they owned the Gulf of Mexico? You know, when they came in. I think there would be a little bit of objection. But you know, this whole idea, that we are an exceptional nation. People use this in a perverse manner. Yes, we're an exceptional nation. This thought has been around a long time, even back to Woodrow Wilson and others. We are such an exceptional nation. We do such wonderful things, and we understand democracy. So we're going to invade countries, use force, use guns, occupy their country, and force them to have elections. And then when they have elections, then they elect the people we didn't want, so we ignore their elections. Supposed to be motivated by good intentions, we end up with more enemies than we need. We just don't need more enemies, more killing, more Americans dying, more people from around the world dying. Drones now bombing almost, they can bomb any spot in the world. And what's going on now? Now they're talking about having thousands of 30,000 drones patrolling our skies in the United States. They would like to control the internet, but fortunately the people heard about that and they raised we have to be very careful because already they've set the standard that the military now is a law enforcement agency for domestic law, that the military now, with the canceling out of posse comitatus, that the military can arrest any American citizen if they become a suspect. They don't get charged, they don't offer an attorney, they can be put in secret prison and considered and kept indefinitely. That is not part of American tradition. That has to be. We have been careless in the way we've gone to war. Up until World War II, we declared war. Some of them shouldn't have been declared, but at least we declared them, and we fought them, and we won them, and we came home. But lately, that hasn't been the case. Since World War II, we haven't declared one war, and the wars are just continuous. They've been very bad these last 10 years. The World War II, fighting both the Japanese and the Germans, was less than 4 years, and there was a victory declared. But today, we've been in Afghanistan for 12 years, and now the reports are coming out. Some of the military people are speaking out, and they're saying, it's all a fake and a fraud. There's been no progress in Afghanistan. absolutely should come home. Somebody asked me once, when should you bring them home? I said, as soon as we get the ships over there. They should come home, and we shouldn't be over there. We shouldn't be pushing ourselves around the world. We should be offering what the founders told us to offer and what's available in the Constitution: friendship and peace. Yep. Friendship and trade. I think one of the most impressive things that impressed on my mind during the 1960s was that I was drafted during the Cuban crisis. I was in the Air Force for 5 years, but I did not have to go to Vietnam, but obviously that was a big event in the 1960s, and we were there to stop the domino effect of communism. Of course, we lost that war. We lost 60,000 men and women that lost their lives, and all the wounded and the tragedies, and the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Vietnamese that died with the 20 years of war by the French and the Americans. All that to impose our will on a country that has civil war going on. And what happened when we lost and left? All of a sudden, there was no domino effect. The domino effect was capitalism that we were giving up on and they were picking up on. China ends up being our banker now, and we're trading partners with the Vietnamese. We go back and forth and trade and invest, and we're not killing each other. So just think how much can be achieved in peace that is never achieved in war. War is a negative. It's always a negative. Some that wonders, about the foreign policy of non-intervention, and they're confused. Why is it that they will ask me? They say, "Ron, you're doing pretty well in the campaign, but you could do so much better if you would just change your foreign policy." I said, if you understood what was going on, if you would come out to an event like this, that's why the people like this campaign. Show that we're on the right track on this is when you look at the money coming in. Where does the money go from the military? It goes to our campaign. We get more money than all the rest put together. So the evidence is very strong that the American people are getting tired of the war. I think this is part of what's happened in the last 4 or 5 years. The freedom movement has been creeping along, but there's been an explosion of interest in the defense of individual liberty. But what happened 4 or 5 years ago in 07 and 08 was the collapse of the economy, and people know how serious it is, and that we're not out of the doldrums yet. And they know also that the people who are benefiting in the financial bubble now are they're the ones who got the bailout. And guess what? The middle class got stuck with the bills. Yep. The middle class got stuck with the bills. They lost their jobs and they lost their houses. Now, I saw a statistic today. It was a poll by one of the major networks. I haven't studied it, but there was one part of it that I sort of liked. And they were gauging all the candidates and their acceptance by the middle class. And our campaign won the acceptance by the middle class, brought it above all the rest. The middle class support. We shouldn't be surprised, because that's what freedom does. It builds the middle class. We had the largest middle class and the most prosperous middle class in the history of the world. But the evidence now is absolutely certain that the middle class is shrinking. It started to shrink even before 07. It started to shrink in the year 2000. At the time of the NASDAQ bubble, the jobs have not come back. And we have been in the doldrums. And now the prosperity that we have today, which is still a fair amount, It's based on debt. That is the big problem. And that's why it's not so. In the productivity, the real production that made America great financially, the productivity is not here. It's overseas due to bad policies, bad monetary policy. Consuming our wealth in wars that don't need to be fought. Consumption, a lot of people, there's been a lot of people who have been taught over the many decades that war is good for the economy. They still teach that in some school. It's an economic myth, and they still teach, and they'll say, well, isn't that when the Depression ended? No, it wasn't. When it lowered unemployment, but you hired 10 million people and put guns in their hands, call them employed, that's hardly fruitful employment, you know. The Depression actually ended after the war, a couple years afterwards, when all the troops came home. 10 million people came home. And the Keynesians said, oh, there's going to be another depression to come home. We have to have job programs. We have to do all these things. Because how will we ever, assimilate having so many people just coming home? They're getting out of the military. 10 million came home. And guess what they did with the budget? They cut the budget by 60%. They cut taxes by 30%. Guess what? The Depression ended there. My modest proposal for the first year is to cut the budget by $1 trillion. Don't need. People still come up and say, and very serious, and they're not being nasty, they'll say, yes, but isn't that going to be harmful? They're being employed by the government. Isn't this beneficial to the economy? The answer is no. Because if you have bureaucrats interfering with your life, and interfering with the economy, that's not productive. So they take the money from the people, and that's a loss. Then they put it in the hands of a bureaucrat who interferes with your life. That's another loss. You've lost twice. But if you take that $1 trillion and put it back into your pockets, and you spend the money, it will be spent much more wisely. None of this financing could have occurred without the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is so seductive in bringing people into believing that this thing can last forever. Thomas Jefferson didn't even want the government to be able to borrow money. That would have been a good idea. And if we even today, if we'd be forced to pay our way, whether it's the war or the welfare, on a daily basis, people would rebel because they would be infuriated on knowing how much taxes they have to pay. So, no, it's delayed. We borrow money. That means you can delay the payment, and then we print the money, and that delays the bad effects from it. But, you know, it used to be that I said, and many people still tend to say, and they say, you know, we can't spend this money today because we're going to give it to the next generation. Well, I've modified that a little bit. We are the next generation. An individual has to do when they get in over their head with debt. They spend too much, they live beyond their means, they have too many credit cards, they don't work real hard, but they've been living on borrowed money. They buy a house and the house doubles in prices, so they borrow more money. Well, that's all come to an end. So when an individual does that, what does common sense tell you? Well, if they want to do it honorably, they're going to pay down their debt. They're going to get another job and live beneath their means and start spending less money, or if necessary, somebody's going to declare bankruptcy. But here, our country gets into trouble because of too much spending, too much debt, too much borrowing, too much printing money, and too much regulation. So they say, yep, there's a crisis here. So what do? They increase the spending, increasing the debt, increasing the printing press money, increase the regulations, and they say, I wonder why it's not working. You know? They don't have the vaguest idea what kind of creative energy comes from people who are free. is so wonderful. To me, it's wonderful because I just want to be free. I want the government out of my life. But guess what? You don't have to give that up. We don't even have to make this choice. That's why we should do a much better job in selling this issue of liberty. Because if you have liberty, not only do you enjoy your personal life better and you get to work for your own excellence and virtue, but you're also much richer. The richest countries in the world have always been the freest countries in the world. Yeah. Society is, the more the wealth is divided unevenly. When a country destroys its currency, there's a natural tendency for the middle class to shrink and the money go to the wealthy. And just think of what's been happening to us. Not only did the wealthy benefit from the destruction of the currency, and there was a smaller group benefiting by the government programs, when the crisis came, they got the bailouts and the bad debt got dumped on the people. That can't happen in a free society, and sometimes they'll challenge me and say, oh, you want so much free enterprise that you don't want to have any regulations. I want regulations of the kind that the free market puts on you. Don't steal and don't rob and don't get benefits from the government. That way, those individuals that said they were too big to fail, guess what? They would have failed and not the middle class American people. Freedom certainly would bring people together because it would not be challenging. We would all accept these liberties and accept other people's lifestyles and their religious lifestyle. That to me would be just wonderful. But freedom is not not a real old idea. People a lot of times will accuse and say, "Oh, you just want to go back to the Dark Ages." They say to me, "You'd be a good candidate for the 18th century." I say, "Guess what's old? Tyranny is old. It's been around for thousands of years." The more the special interests win the game. Do you think in the Soviet system there wasn't a special class who benefited the most? There was always a neat little group that benefited the most, no matter how much. It just gets more uneven the more tyrannical it is, and the poorer the people get. Now we are moving in that direction, but we can reverse it. And we don't even have to invent anything new. We were given the opportunity. Not a perfect document, but a darn good document. And the document, of course, it was warned by the founders, would only be as good as the morality of the people. So it's up to us to decide what we want and use the document, hold the feet to the fire of the politicians. By having too many people in Washington that either didn't understand or care about the Constitution. That's how we got into this mess. Why isn't the solution only sending people there who care about it and will obey the Constitution? The importance of individual liberty is understanding that it is truly individual. What we have drifted into in the last 100 years or 70 years or so is we have hyphenated our liberties, because we belong to a group. But liberty is not hyphenated except for one thing. Individuals. Individuals have liberties, not because you belong to a group. Certain groups lost their liberties because they belonged to a group, and that was wrong. So the people shouldn't get punishment nor benefits because they belong to a particular group. But if you're an individual, you should have absolutely the same rights as everybody else. And you certainly deserve the protection of the rule of law, and that you should be protected against the government. The government should be undermined. And that was the purpose of the government, to protect the liberty. And here they are arresting us now and saying you don't even deserve an attorney. This is not You know, the founders also warned us that if we weren't careful, they believed in the republic, they were explicit, they knew what a republic was. It was representative government, it was small government, it was regional government, and they really worried a lot about democracy. And we have become careless thinking democracy is the perfect term, because we go around the world dying for democracy. But democracy is the dictatorship of the 51%. Put a coalition together of 51%, and they can strip you of all your rights. The purpose of government is to protect you if you're an individual, not to have your rights taken from you. Ideas truly have consequences, and I think what's happening today, there truly is a revolution going on. It's a revolution with ideas. It's picking up the pieces where we left off 50, 70, 80, 90 years ago, picking up a good experiment that we had, the best one ever. And we can build on this. We don't have to reinvent it. And it's much different than some of the other countries. When the Soviet system collapsed, they did not have the same tradition. We at least have had traditions of private property rights. We've had traditions of sound money and limited government. And we, unfortunately, though, have been too careless with this. This is one thing that we do is we reject the principle of private property rights. We're just renters these days. We pay a high amount of taxes. They tell us when we can use it or not use it. And truly, the property is not owned by the people. Another example of not having ownership of our lives really is the income tax. The income tax is based on the proposition that the government owns all your income. No, they don't take all your income, but they control all your income. They tell you how much you can keep, you have to jump through all the hoops, and then they will allow you to keep a certain percentage, which means they have 100% control over your income. The principle of the income tax is basically anti-liberty. And the way that is set up, so in a true republic, the founders believed at least, they didn't give us the income tax. We slipped into having the income tax. They didn't give us the central bank. We gave that to ourselves. So we, as a people, have a lot of responsibilities too. But because we were so wealthy, people thought, well, the wealth will never disappear. And more people then became more concerned about the material benefits of liberty. And it sort of invited the notion to get more goods and services. What you had to do is have more influence in Washington. So the lobbyists come in and they run the show and the redistribution of wealth. And guess what? The defense of liberty went into the doldrums. And that has been going on for a good many years. Except it's alive and well today and growing by leaps and bounds. And the people know that the government can't deliver what they have promised. They can't deliver peace and prosperity. Only the people can do that, forcing the politicians to obey the Constitution. To see a reversal is that we have to quit lying to ourselves. We can't. If it's a drug addict, they have to finally admit they have a problem, and then they come back. And we have to admit that we can't keep lying to ourselves. We have problems. We know what they are. It's too much government. It's not enough liberty. We need our Constitution. The solutions are out there. They're available to us, and the revolution is really going on. Ideas have consequences, and I am delighted to tell you that there's a couple of groups coming together. Those who have dreamed about it, but rather have been complacent over the years because they have been disenfranchised and haven't been engaged, and they're coming back in because they hold things together. It's the remnant of society that always exists. They come back and they understand it, and they are coming out of the woodworks. The numbers are, difficult to measure. But we also have a whole new generation. The university students are alive. delivering the greatest message. There are some of my friends who don't believe in political action. They believe in education, and they do a good job, and they understand economics, and I think that's okay. People who understand that then want to dedicate their life to education, and it's fine. They get very frustrated with politics. But the truth is, you do need both. You do need idealism, and you do need education. You do need an understanding of economics, and you need the academicians standing up and explaining things. But ultimately, they have to be translated into a message that the people understand. Because if we want these changes, people will only accept them if they know it's in their best self-interest. And liberty is in all our self-interest. That is the message that we have to deliver. We have just a few things. We need to change the foreign policy, a foreign policy of peace rather than war. We need a monetary policy of protecting wealth, not the destruction of the wealth of this country. We need property rights and understanding, but we need local government. We don't need another level of government going up to the United Nations and NATO. We don't need the federal government getting any bigger. We need to shrink the size of the federal government. We need to deliver the government back to the people. And you had the liberties passed on back to the individual, it would be self-government. That would be the ultimate test, as long as we accept one principle, that we don't force other people to try to live the way we want to live. Stay out of the There's no reason to believe that we can't be successful. There's an election coming up. I hope you will participate. I hope you will. Coast, which is in big trouble. Let's make sure the one on the West Coast sends a powerful message.
Have that parking lot for at least an hour. Yeah. John's dad was still